On today's episode of the ThriveMore podcast, I interview Ruth Agbaji. Ruth was born in Nigeria, came to the United States at a young age for college, taught herself how to code, has gone on to work for Microsoft and other big companies, but decided she wanted to build her own business and started the franchise Code Wiz. I'm going to tell you right now, this was one of the most enjoyable interviews I've ever done. Her spirit is so beautiful. Her message is awesome, and she's as real and authentic as you can get. And you are going to fall in love with Ruth because she's just the real deal. Enjoy. Ruth is the CEO, founder, and nerd-in-chief of Code Wiz, a national franchise teaching kids coding and robotics. She knows firsthand the power in learning to code. Born in Nigeria, Ruth hacked her way into the world of computer science by teaching herself how to code. She received her master's in computer science from Tufts University and worked as a software engineer for tech giants like Microsoft and Kronos. Her entrepreneurial spirit and desire to impact kids' lives by sparking their interest in STEM disciplines led her to quit her day job and launch Code Wiz. Ruth's initial vision was to have a center with an interactive and project-driven approach to technology to inspire kids of all abilities to unleash their imagination and their potential. Ruth, welcome to the ThriveMore podcast.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you here. You have such a rich and amazing story. The listeners are in for a treat because the research that I did, if we can start at the beginning, born in Nigeria, and kind of your childhood, and then we'll make the journey, all the way up through you founding Code Wiz and franchising and whatnot. But can you kind of start, like, what was life like? And what was it like to be a little girl in Nigeria?
Absolutely. So born and raised in Nigeria, like you said, the earlier parts of growing up, things weren't so bad, things were working. My parents are in the academia. So my mom's a professor, my dad's a researcher. Life was good. But then when I started to hit like 10, things started to get, more challenging. The economy started to fall apart, and, it's hard for people to imagine in this country, a person who is in the academia not having a ton of food to eat. But that's really what it was like growing up at some point when things got really difficult. You wouldn't be able to afford to buy gas. So you ride bicycles. I mean, here we ride bicycles for fun.
Yeah,
Back home, you ride bicycles because you can't afford to pay for gas.
Yeah.
So it got really challenging. We used to have running water. Then we stopped having running water. And we would have to walk, like miles to go get water. And then you balance it on your head. You come back. I was telling my daughter, and we were taking a walk, and I was like, growing up, we used to walk this distance and we would have to carry this in our head. And she's like, there's no way. I'm like, yeah.
Yes.
So it's hard to imagine, but that's kind of how we grew up. Electricity at some point just became non-existent. If you get 2 hours of electricity in a day, you celebrate.
Wow.
When the electricity turns on, you hear a cheer go on in the neighborhood. So that's kind of how we grew up, and we kind of got used to it.
Yeah.
But things really came to a head for me personally when the Boko Haram group, then they were called a different name, but it's all the same people branded differently. When they really started to have an uptick in their religious violence activities. They unfortunately, we agree to disagree. If you don't agree with me, then you're gone. So there's a lot of religious violence. There's a lot of rioting. You never go out on Fridays. You stay in your house because Fridays is typically when the violence would happen. Wow. You don't stay out late beyond 6 p.m. Yeah. So once it's 6 p.m., you need to be home. So it got really challenging for me. And one particular incident that really turned things around for me, that made me, just stop myself and say, how long are you going to keep taking this? Is this how you're going to continue to live your life? My mom and I were walking on the campus, and for some reason, somebody must have said something and it triggered a riot. And we saw this mob of like almost 1,000 people just coming towards us. And they're armed with machetes and knives and spears and anything they can find. And we were just there, frozen. My mom and I were just frozen. And I think somebody just yelled in the back, just run. Like, why are you standing there? Just run. And we ran and we hid in a church under some pews. And the mob, they didn't see us, so they passed by. And then around the same time, I have an uncle who was...
And how old were you right around that time?
At that time, I was probably around maybe 16, 17. Yep. So I was like maybe like first or second year of college. We go to college early back in Nigeria. And my uncle at that time was also burned alive. And so I was just like, okay, something's got to give. I cannot live my life this way. This is when you're in an abusive situation, you tend to develop coping mechanisms. And so all around you, everybody's like, oh, it's okay. All you have to do is just don't go out on Fridays. Just don't talk to anyone about religious issues. But I'm like, no, I should be able to do whatever I want to do.
Yeah.
So anyways, that was the trigger. That was a trigger point for me. And so I started to think about, how could I get out of this situation? How could I do something that would help my life be different than what I was seeing around me? So my undergrad is electrical engineering, and our classes are massive.
Wow.
Right? We had like 1,000 people in a class, and I'm not even like exaggerating.
Yeah.
And so it was very difficult to actually learn, like, a lot of the theory of I know a lot of the theory of electrical engineering, but the practical part was very hard because we had small practical rooms. We had barely functional equipment. And so I was like, this is not working. I need to learn something that would help me stand out in a college application. So prior to that, I had decided that my way out was education.
Yep.
So for those who are familiar with the Nigerian culture, you would understand that we are big on education. The answer to everything is education. You don't have a job, go get an education. Yep. You need a spouse, go back to school. The answer is always education. So it's not surprising that Nigerians are I think they said they're the highest educated group in the US or something like that. Yeah. So we're very big on education. So naturally, I was thinking about, how can I get an education to get out of this situation? Yeah. So, and my parents got their PhDs from a college in the UK. So I had that sort of exposure that it was possible. Mm-hmm. So I started to think about how to do that for myself. But because my degree, I didn't feel confident in what I knew and what I knew how to do. I felt like I needed to teach myself something different, or just do something different that would help me to stand out. And so that's kind of how I came across coding. Now, they had taught us coding in school, but they had taught us how to code on paper. So we would write the code, and then the professor would look at it and be like, yeah, I think that's correct.
Wow. So
we'd never run it on a computer. Yeah. No clue how that worked. And it was like BASIC and Fortran, which is something that people stopped using in the 80s. And this was the early 2000s. So I had a peripheral understanding of coding. But when somebody was talking about, I learn a lot by listening to people. And so somebody was talking, I was eavesdropping, and they were talking about C# and ASP.NET. And I was like, what's that? That seems very intriguing. So I went to the internet cafe, because we didn't have internet at home like we all did here. Yeah. And the internet cafe, the way that works is there's a whole bunch of computers connected to the internet, and you pay per hour. So I paid probably be like 4 or 5 hours at a time. And then I would just go there and sit and read about C# and ASP.NET. And I started to download articles, and I was like, this is it. This is very exciting. All I need is a laptop, and I can teach myself how to do this around the same time. So all the stars were just aligning for me. Around the same time, my mom got a laptop through some government grants. So I grabbed that from her. I downloaded all my stuff on it. It took 3 weeks to download.
Oh, jeez.
It took 3 weeks to download. I think it's probably like, I have this burned in my memory. I think it's like 101 megabytes. Not that heavy.
No.
But it took like 3 weeks. There's special software that kind of serves as a bucket, and it just collects things bite by bite and saves it for you. So anyways, took 3 weeks, downloaded it. I installed the IDE, and then I started to work on a project. Now, like I said, my parents are professors, so I'd seen them struggle with grading. Like they would have these thousands of exam papers that they had to grade, and there's no TAs. It's just you grading all of that. So I wanted to create a solution that would help professors and help students, honestly, to have a better experience when it comes to writing exams. So that was my big vision. Now, this is something that would take a team of experienced software engineers to do. But I'm like, I can do this, no big deal. So I started, very quickly got stuck. And I reached out to, I got stuck. I was Googling the problem, as all professional software engineers do. But I couldn't quite find what the answer to my problem. Like I could see similar errors and similar solutions, but none of them really solved the problem that I had. And so I reached out to one of the persons who had written a solution similar to the problem I had. And I was like, hey, thank you for this article. It doesn't quite solve my problem. And I was hoping you would help me with this particular problem. And shockingly, he replied. And he's like, yeah, of course, I'd love to help you. And so over 6 months, he became my mentor. I would email him my code. He would, look at it, run it on his end. If there were any issues or things I needed to learn, best practices, he would let me know. And it was through that relationship I was able to finish the project. And because I finished that project, the proof of concept, let's say, because I was able to develop that proof of concept, I was able to get a master's here in the U.S. And that's how I came. That's how I came to the U.S.
Wow!
Just believing that I was made for more, I could do more, I could be more, and I was a lot more than the environment that I was in.
So you came here alone then? It wasn't with your family?
No, I came alone. Yeah, I did not know anyone. I had a distant aunt that lived in Florida, but that was it. I didn't know a single soul. And I came in the winter.
Yeah,
all times.
So Nigeria to Boston area, right?
Yeah.
To the Northeast. Oh, welcome to America. Yeah. Yikes. So when was it? So then you got your master's and then you went to work for some of these larger companies to get some experience. Is that what happened?
Correct. Okay. So at first, just full transparency, so it doesn't sound like it's the perfect journey.
Never is. It never is.
It never is. Yeah. So I actually got admitted to a PhD program because, again, my parents had their PhDs, and Nigerian education, you should have your PhD. So I got it for a PhD program, but then 2 years in, I was like, this is not for me. I cannot do this. So I was like, can I just please take my master's and leave? And they were like, sure, you can do that. So I left after my master's. And then the job I got was not a very good job. I hated it. It was a testing job, and I'm not the most detail-oriented person. And so when you're a tester, you should be detail-oriented.
Yeah.
So
you're testing other people's code to make sure it works.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. I was a quality assurance engineer. So I was testing an app. And my approach to testing was, well, this looks like it should work. And so it was a lot of confirmation bias. I clicked all of this and it worked. So rather than trying to break it.
Yeah.
So I was not a star performer because that was just not a good fit for my skills. Yeah. So I was kind of frustrated because it just wasn't something that I wanted to do. I don't like to break things. I like to feel things. Yeah. And so I was like, I'm here in this situation again where I feel like I could be more and I could do more. And I don't feel like this is what I'm meant to do. And at that time, working for the big tech companies was the goal of most software engineers. So I said, okay, I want to work for Google, Apple, Amazon, or Microsoft, one of them. So I started, you have to study to get into those places. I don't know how it is now, but back then there's a textbook that's this thick and you have to study. So I studied all of that. I kept applying, kept being rejected. I remember flying to Seattle. I was 27 weeks pregnant.
Oh
I
my
went there for
gosh.
an interview. They were like, nope. I was like, all right, no problem. Keep trying. So I kept trying. I finally got an interview in Microsoft here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I was 37 weeks pregnant. And I was like, okay, you're either going for this or you're not going for this.
Yeah.
So I showed up there. I'm sure the interviewers probably had no idea what to do with me because my belly was so big. But I really believe, that when you have a dream and when you want something, you shouldn't let, as much as possible, you shouldn't let anything stop you from achieving those goals. And so I went there, interviewed. I got in. So that's how I got into Microsoft.
Yep.
So I stayed there for about 2.5 years. And this whole feeling again of, you can do more, you can be more, started to come up. I was experiencing a lot of imposter syndrome there because a lot of the people who work there are like super smart. They're just
Sure.
really smart. And a lot of them had learned to code as kids,
Yeah.
and here I was with my adult education and I'm trying to play catch up with these people. And to be honest, I had insecurities around my accent, and how do you want to raise up your hand in a room of super smart people? So I started to feel a lot of that, and I was like, I don't know. I had two options. I feel like I had two options. I either had to fight my way through all of that, or just break away and do my own thing and start my own thing. So I had a lot of issues. I'm like a quadruple minority. I was a Black person in a STEM field. I was a woman. There's just so many things going on. And so I decided I'm just going to start my own thing. And I am going to build a table where everybody is welcome, right? Where people feel like they don't feel like they have to fight to have a voice, right? Like it's just a thing on the team that you can voice your opinions and you can share your ideas. I've always been entrepreneurial. So back in Nigeria, I've always had random businesses. I tried to do fashion design one time. I don't know why I tried that because I'm not even fashionable. So naturally, it didn't work. While I was working at Microsoft, I met my husband here in the US. He's also Nigerian. And so I was like, my friend introduced me to him. There must be other people who would love introductions to other Nigerians. So I'm going to start a dating site. So I started a dating site. And this was pre-COVID. I feel like if I had done it after COVID, I'd have been wildly successful.
Sure.
But then people were like, yeah, no, I don't want to be on a dating site. It's kind of weird. It's awkward. So, but I did a lot of things. And when I decided that I wanted to leave and move on and do my own thing, I really sat down this time, for the first time really in all my entrepreneurial ventures, to think about what is it that I really want out of a business? What is this restlessness that I keep constantly having? And what is it that will satisfy that restlessness? What would make me happy? What is my why? Right? And really understanding that. And I decided that I just really wanted to have an impact on people and the world. I found that working Microsoft, it was amazing, but you work 8 hours a week and you have no idea who's using your code. How is it changing any lives? You don't really know. Yeah. So impact was a huge thing for me. I want to do something that helps me impact the world in a positive way. The guy who had helped me with my code in India, Saurabh, if he hadn't given me his time, I wouldn't be here. So I wanted to pay that forward. Yeah. So when I combine, and I really love coding. I love the idea of building something out of nothing. Yeah. So when I combine all of that, I was like, I should do a coding for kids business. Wow. And that's kind of how, and I love being silly. I absolutely love being silly. My kids have tons of videos of me just being silly in the house. And so I was like, this will let me be silly. Yeah, right? Yeah. So that's how Code Wiz was born.
Oh, Ruth, that's a great Genesis story. Just great. Was there, when you made that leap of faith, it's always a little scary when you leave a corporate environment with the benefits and the salary and all that. So to start your own business and start Code Wiz, do you remember back to that moment when you were like, okay, I'm I'm going to do this. And you had to face that, that big mountain of fear that we all have to face at one point when we start a business.
Yeah, it was absolutely terrifying because, all the other ventures I had tried, I had put in maybe like $1,000, $2,000. Now I was putting in $70,000, and I had to get an SBA loan. We had to put our house down as collateral. Now, you have to understand the immigrant mindset. The immigrant mindset is when you get to America, you put your head down and you just do work to give your kids a good life, to give them a fighting chance. You don't go taking risks. That's not the immigrant mindset.
Yeah.
And so my husband and I had just bought our first house ever. And here was I a few months later saying, hey, I would love to put a house as collateral for a loan for a business that I think would work. And he's like, I love my husband. He's the most supportive person ever. But in that moment, he's like, okay, I trust you. But whatever you do, please do not lose the house. That's all I care about.
One small ask, don't lose our house.
So it was scary. And again, my parents, everybody was so proud of me. We have somebody who works in Microsoft. It's such a big deal. And you're quitting your 6-figure job to run a business? What is this flexibility that you're after? Can't you talk to your manager? So there were so many, voices discouraging me. By the way, my parents work for Code Wiz now.
Oh, wow.
Which is awesome. But I was terrified. I remember getting the lease and I held it for 5 days before I could sign it, because I knew that once I signed it, it was real. The loan, you can return it, but once you sign the lease, it's real. And I held it for 5 days, but I knew in my heart that I was born to do this, right? I knew that something had to change. I knew that I was unhappy where I was. And I asked myself, the banker asked me this question. He said, what's the worst that would happen? You would fail and you would just go back to work, right? But then you would have, because I think he was trying to justify the loan to himself. Yeah. And I was like, yes, absolutely. But then that helped me too, because I was like, all right, that's the worst that could happen. I would do this, I would fail, and I would just go back to work. But I would have known that I tried.
Yeah.
And there would never be a situation where I would be looking back and say, oh, darn, I wish I took the leap. I wish I tried. And having all of that, all of those regrets. If I do it, then I know I did it. I tried, and I would learn something from it.
The heaviest burden to carry is regret, right? That's the hard. So you have to go for it. And you're right. There's for anybody listening that's on the verge of starting a business, there's going to be a moment where you have to put pen to paper, and your hand shakes, right? Your hands, and that's just everybody. I don't care who you are. And then when you do bigger deals, your hand shakes because the deals are bigger, right? Yeah. There's no you still freak out. So let me ask you this. And you said you love to be silly, and so kids made sense. But I keep hearing a theme through your story around, you just felt you were meant for something bigger. That you were meant, and it's almost like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but helping these children, allow them to experience that same feeling of, I know I can do something bigger and greater than maybe my parents did or other people's goals. Yeah.
Exactly. So I learned to code as an adult, but it was so freeing. It opened up so many doors of opportunity for me that I would never have had. And we always, our mission is to help kids unlock their inner geniuses through coding and robotics. And that really came from what I experienced. Now, I feel like my inner genius, again, like you said, the whole thing of feeling like I was made for more, like I could do more, like there was just a genius on the inside that was just waiting to be unleashed. And that happened for me to an extent. And it's a process of unleashing, right? I feel like there's more genius in there somewhere. that I need to continually unleash. But that's something that I want to bring to the kids, is helping them to find that genius in there that's that may or may not have found expression yet, and helping them to unlock that and know that it's okay. We have a lot of kids who come to us that tend to be quote unquote nerdy, the stereotypical, just like my son. I have one topic that I love to talk about, and I don't care if anyone else is interested in this topic. I'm going to talk about this topic. So we have a lot of them who come to us, and it's so beautiful to see them just thrive and find friends that are just like them, who love to talk about one particular thing and geek out about computers or stars or the universe. Yep. And it's that genius in them that perhaps in school, in other neurotypical social circles, people might be like, oh my gosh, dude, you're weird. Yeah. But no, at Code Wiz, you're not weird. This is who we are. Yeah. And so it allows them to just express themselves and be themselves. So it's not even just genius from an academic perspective, but even socially. Sure. Right? You find your tribe, you find your friends, people that think like you and act like you. That really was the thinking behind Code Wiz, and it really has come to life. We've seen parents cry, that their kids have found friends, that their kids have found their space. And it's such a beautiful thing to experience.
I love that. Hey, everyone. As you know, I don't have any advertisements nor sponsorships on this podcast. My only ask of you, the listener, is that you share this podcast with someone that you know, a friend, a family member, a coworker, or a colleague who may benefit from this information, may benefit from today's guest, from the value that they're sharing with the audience, with you, the listener. When you share this podcast and our audience grows, it allows me to book more and more guests who have a great message, great nuggets of wisdom that you can benefit from, and again, your network can benefit from. So please, right now, push that share button, send it to somebody that you care about, and let's get back to the interview. I have a question here, but you've kind of answered, but I'd love for you to expand upon it, is how have you seen then your students at Code Wiz grow outside of the classroom? And I think you just alluded to that as far as them finding their tribe and these parents crying. So just talk about that a little bit, if you could, how Code Wiz is helping them outside of the Code Wiz classroom.
Yeah, I another story I will never forget was one child who I think she was neurodivergent, and so she was constantly going to the doctors for assessments, and she had I'm not sure what it was. I think it was a math assessment, but they were assessing her for something. And she came back to tell us a story that they gave her the XY coordinates and asked her to plot something. And she only knew that because last week in her class, she had tried to put her cat up on the top right corner of the screen, and her teacher had explained to her XY coordinates. Oh. So that was really cool to hear how she'd taken that learning and used it in a different context, in a different environment. We're starting to see, because we're about 6 years old now, so we're starting to see kids grow up and going to college, and seeing how their time at Code Wiz has influenced their decisions at college. Now, one of the things that I did not anticipate would happen when we started, because the coaches that work with the kids are younger. They're typically like high school seniors, first year college students, how Code Wiz would impact them as well. So we have a high school student who she worked with the 6-year-olds, I'm sorry. And when she was going to college, she said, she sent me a message on LinkedIn, and she said, I decided to go for biomedical engineering. I've always wanted to do biomedical engineering, but because I worked at Code Wiz and I saw how awesome it was to work with kids, I've decided that I want to build biomedical devices for kids when I grow up. So it was just like, wow, I didn't think that. I always thought about it from perspective of impact of the kids, but not so much the staff, that come through our program, and you hear people, so many stories. Some of them will come back and say, I got this job because of my time at Code Wiz. My life was changed because of the 3 months that I spent at Code Wiz.
Yeah.
So it's awesome. And now that we're a franchise and we have 18, the number keeps changing.
Yeah, I was getting ready to ask you that. Yeah. When you
I
can't
think
remember, that's a high class problem. When you can't remember how many are open, you're in a growth mode. That's a good thing. I love it.
Okay, I'll take that as a positive then.
Yeah.
I think we have 18 open now, and then 5 more should be open between now and Q2 of next year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing to see. I love the Google reviews. When I've had an awful day, I like to go through the Google reviews of our centers. And there was one child that is my favorite Google review of all time. The mom wrote the review and said, my child went to camp here and he absolutely loved it. And his words were, Mom, this is the first place that wants me to come back.
Oh.
And I was just like, whoa.
That'll move your heart. Wow.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I shed tears that day.
Wow.
But yeah, so the mission is it's a beautiful mission. I love our mission, and to see it actually happening, not just in the one that I started, but at all of our franchises across the U.S. It's such a beautiful thing.
Did you ever think when you were a little girl in Nigeria that it would evolve to this?
Never. Yeah. Never. Not in my wildest imagination. Even when I started in 2017, the goal was the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal was 5 locations in Massachusetts. I would feel like I was the most accomplished person in the world. Yep. And here we are with 20. Never imagined it. But I'm so glad that I took that leap of faith. I'm so glad that I believed in myself. I'm so glad that I trusted that inner voice that said, you were made for more. I'm so glad that I didn't give into fear. I'm so glad that I love my family and they love me, and all the advice they were giving me was from a place of love. But I'm so glad I didn't listen.
Yeah.
Because if I did, I wouldn't be here today. And not that the journey is easy. It's not. It's every phase has a different challenge that you're dealing with. And when you go through those challenges, you're like, darn, maybe I should have done this. Maybe I should have listened to them. But I try not to make decisions in those moments because I understand that I'm in a place where I'm tired, I'm stressed, I'm exhausted. But I always keep the why in front of me. Why am I doing this? Mm-hmm. This is why. And I have to push through. And I have to dig deeper, find gas somewhere in the tank, and keep pushing. Yeah. I'm doing it for the kids. I am doing it for the kids.
You've got a mission. I love that. So what is your, we're talking about BHAGs. If you go into the future and you look back on Code Wiz in 10 years, what does it look like? What have you done, and how has it impacted the world?
It's a great question. So right now, that big, hairy, audacious goal for 10 years is that we would have touched in one way, shape, or form 500,000 kids across the world, whether it's through our classes, camps, the one-day events, one way or the other, we would have impacted 500,000 kids, and their experience would have made their lives better. And the way we do that is through franchising.
Yep.
Right. So we would probably be at about 200 to 250 locations at that point. And the mission really has changed somewhat because I've talked a lot about the kids, but then there is an and to that mission that involves our franchisees, because a lot of our franchisees or a lot of them are like me, where it's, you want to do something different. You want to start your own business. You want to impact your community, impact your kids. And, they come in with that amazing mission, and then they come in and they're like, man, business is hard.
Yeah.
Business is hard. I'm like, yes, it is, but you can do this. And so being able to see our franchisees flourish while driving the mission of the company is hugely important to me. So in 10 years, part of that big, hairy, audacious goal is to have the majority of our franchisees flourishing and thriving and being super profitable while living the life that they want to live, while having a purpose-driven business.
Yeah, that's a win-win-win-win.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, and you're right. Business, and we're very open about that here with our franchising. I always say it's a simple model. Like our models are simple. They're pretty business in a box, paint by numbers. But I'll never say it's easy. Because business is hard. And just when you think, like you said, just when you think you've got it figured out, probably means you've evolved to the next level, which means there's a whole new set of challenges there.
Yeah.
And if your business isn't, you should always be, identifying that constraining factor, because if it's not, your business is kind of stuck. So something should break as you go to the next level. Yeah, and then you fix that, right? So what would you say, speaking of breaking, what would you say if you had to look back, because I think some of the best nuggets of wisdom and learning come from people who have been there before you. And so anybody listening is probably wondering, well, what pitfalls should I avoid? Because you said, I wish I would have done this or maybe done that. So where would you say was maybe one of the bigger missteps you've made in entrepreneurship? And I'm sure you've overcome it, but if you could go back, you'd say, I wouldn't have done that, or I would have done that very differently. What happened there?
When I started in 2017, I'm a huge DIYer, right? Like I feel like there's nothing I cannot figure out given time and energy.
Yeah.
There's nothing I cannot figure out. But I think that looking back at 2017, knowing what I know now, I would have hired a business coach from day one. Somebody who's been there, done that, to really guide me and help me avoid some costly mistakes. Because I was building the business just based on pure gut and instinct, right? Which, yes, that can take you far and you make mistakes and you learn from it. But I wish that if I had if I could go back, I would have gotten a business coach, because then I would have had a better marketing plan. I would have known to be tracking my numbers versus, whoa, I got $5 in the bank. Where is all this money going?
Yep.
So financials, is the thing that I would have learned earlier, not the hard way, but I would have learned how to plan for that, how to read a P&L, how to understand that, how to hire people, which is why I really like franchising, because we, as much as possible, we try to provide that from day one for our franchisees. So you don't have to figure it out. It's a lot harder trying to figure it out on your own than if somebody really tells you what to do. So that would be my one thing. I think I messed up a lot with marketing. I spent tons of money on things I shouldn't have spent money on. I did not understand how payroll worked in terms of like I was just scheduling people randomly, and then my payroll was like 70-something% at some point. So I think if I had a business coach, I would not have made those mistakes in the beginning.
No, that's wise advice. So you said you're a mother as well.
Yeah.
And so you're a mother who is also building a business. And I've been I'm a parent of two. For a while, I was a single parent while I was trying to build a business. And I would just love to get your take on, because everybody's wondering, well, how do you do it all? How do you fit it all in? And as a parent, as a spouse, as a business builder, and what advice would you give to people who are struggling with kind of fitting it all in?
I think honestly, I feel like work-life balance is somewhat of a myth. Like something is always out of balance, if you will. And I think being comfortable living in that tension is the best thing you can do for yourself. If you are going to try to say, I'm working hard to figure out a permanent work-life balance solution, you're just going to drive yourself crazy.
Yeah.
To me, what I've told myself is that there will always be a tension between work and life. And sometimes it's life, that I have to prioritize, and sometimes it's work that I have to prioritize. And that's okay. It's just never going to be perfect. There was an analogy that somebody gave me that really helped. She said, you have all sorts of balls that you're juggling, and some are going to drop. Just as you're deciding which ones to drop, just don't drop the glass ones. You can drop the rubber ones because it falls and you can pick it up again. But if you drop the glass ones, it breaks and you can never pick that up again. So as you're juggling between life and work, there are some things that will be glass balls. There are some things that are rubber. There are probably some things that are wood. Just keep the glass ones in that juggling process. Drop the rubber ones, pick them back up again, but keep the glass ones consistently in your hands. It is tough, and my kids. I have 2 kids. My daughter is gonna mess this up. 10. She's 10. My son is
I'm going to
7.
let you get away with not knowing how many franchises are open, but you should know your daughter's age.
The problem is every time it's close to her birthday, she starts to quote the age that she's about to turn. And so it just messes with my head. Yeah. So she's going to be 11 in December, but right now she's 10. Yeah. And my son is 7. And my son has special needs. So he's on the autism spectrum, which was interesting because he got diagnosed 3 months after I started Code Wiz. So that's a whole different story of how I survived that. But throughout his life, it's just been a thing of balance. All right, I'm here right now. Work can wait. I'll do that later. Or, hey guys, if I don't get this thing done, the whole company's in trouble. So my husband's name is Sean, and you take the kids to the movies or something. Just give me 5 hours.
Yeah.
And having a supportive and understanding family is critical.
Yeah. I love that you talk about that. That there's no balance. It's a balancing act.
Yeah.
And that act is forever going on. That's what I've found. If somebody out there has the secret, drop it in the comments or whatever, because I haven't figured it out yet. Yeah. So a few final questions here. I love to read. My listeners know I'm a big fan of biographies and business books. As you went on your entrepreneurial journey, Ruth, was there a book that you had picked up, you read, and when you set it down, you said, "Wow, I will never think about this subject, whatever that may have been, the same. This book changed me. This is my go-to on XYZ." Is there one you can think of?
Mm-hmm. Traction.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Gina
Traction.
Wickman. Yeah.
Yes, because I am not a very structured person. Like I just, let's do this today. Oh, guys, no. Let's do that today. And I found that the team was so stressed because there's all these projects going on. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. Yeah. And people started to talk to me about traction. And I read the book, and just having the understanding that I am a visionary and naturally would have tons of ideas and want to conquer the world and all of that it is important for me to get someone who can take those ideas and make them, a reality. That's one. 2, the person can say, yeah, Ruth, thanks, but no thanks. Not today. And then having a structured approach to planning of our annual goals, planning of our quarterly goals, which fit into the annual goals, having rocks, and then the structured L10. So we're not, because when I go into a meeting without structure, we can be there for like an hour and we ended up talking about everything but what we should be talking about. Yep. Traction really puts structure around the business for us. And that is something that I personally needed because I am not a structured person. So that really changed my life.
We run traction here as well, and we'll be in an L10 meeting. And for those listening, L10 is just a fancy word for a level 10 meeting. You should have a 10 out of 10 score for how productive the meeting was. But I've just found myself, like, we'll be in a meeting, I'll say, wait, are we ideating right now? Or are we actually solving this issue? Because people can ideate for hours, and it's easy to go down that path. Yeah. But we're not solving anything, and we're certainly not assigning action items because we're
exactly
out in the ether. Yeah, that's funny. I've experienced the same thing. A couple last questions here. This one is not meant to be dark by any means, but it's I think it's a great exercise to think about. If If we were to fast forward to the end of your very beautiful, full, rich life, and we're at your funeral, and you're looking up, down from above, and somebody is reading, a loved one is reading your eulogy, and they could only say up to 3 words to describe you. If they could only use up to 3 words to describe you, what would you hope that they would say about you on that day?
Wow. I've never heard this one before. Inspiring would be one word that I hope they would use. Loving and giving.
I think from everything you've shared in this interview, I'm pretty sure you'll hear those 3 words.
I hope so.
Yeah. And then one of the one that, we're living in a crazy world today. So if Ruth had a magic wand and Ruth could wave a magic wand and make one, but just one material change to the world as we know it, how would the world be different according to Ruth?
We would all get along. We would understand each other. Because I think a lot of the crisis that we face in different parts of the world just really stems from misunderstanding each other. We see things through our perspectives and don't often take the time to see things from another person's perspective. Especially when we have cultural differences. Someone says something that means something different in a different culture, and we all get mad and fights erupt, or we label a person a certain way just because we misunderstood them. I think we would all understand each other. Is what I would love, because I think if we all understood each other, we would all get along, and if we all got along, there would be peace on earth.
Yep. It's funny. That's becoming a common theme in people's answers to that question.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate to have a graduate business professor from Ghana. And part of this class was we went overseas and visited some countries and companies. We visited these companies to learn how they ran their businesses overseas. That was like the end project for this class. And I remember, I'll never forget what he said. He's like, look, everybody grew up in America, like 90% raised their hand. He said, when you go over here, I don't want you to think that it's better or worse. I don't want you to even think, if you see something that's better than we have it in the United States, don't think it's better. And certainly if you see something you think is worse, don't think it's worse. It's just different. And I like, that is burned in my brain. And every time I've traveled internationally, I can say I prefer this or that in the United States, but it's not better or worse. It's just different. It's different. Yeah. And that whole core of communication and understanding that we don't have to completely agree. That's totally cool.
Yeah.
I can respect your opinion, respect mine. We'll go about our separate ways.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know why we're not doing that, but we're not as a world. we're not as a country either. It's anyways. All right. So I guess really the most important question is, Ruth, one, I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I know the audience has. How can people follow you, get in touch with you, and connect with you? What's the best way?
LinkedIn. So I haven't been as active in the last 3 weeks because we've been super busy in the business, but LinkedIn is the best way to connect. I love to share stories about kids on LinkedIn, our franchisees, who's opening, and just my thoughts and lessons learned from parenting and business ownership. So LinkedIn would be the best way. I'm very poor at email, so we'll give you my email. All
right. Well, we'll put your LinkedIn, the direct link in the show notes, and then people can connect right with you. Well, again, man, the pleasure has been all mine. You have a beautiful soul, and it just it's shown in this podcast. So thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.